Most people would never look twice at a brown penny from 1981. It's the kind of coin that rattles around in a cup holder, hides under couch cushions, or gets tossed back to the cashier without a second thought. 1 cent practically invisible. And yet, what if that same penny could be worth more than a house? More than a retirement fund? What if one ordinary-looking Lincoln cent has reportedly sold for as much as $844,000, and others are whispered about in the same breath as seven-figure treasures? This is not a story about gold bars or pirate chests. This is a story about the coin you might already own, because in 1981, something happened at the U.S. Mint that most Americans never noticed. No headlines, no press releases, just a quiet year that may have produced some of the most shocking penny errors collectors have ever chased. And the most dangerous part? These coins don't announce themselves. They hide in plain sight. Let me ask you something. If life-changing money were sitting in a jar in your house, would you know how to spot it? Act 1 begins with a simple fact that sounds harmless enough. In 1981, Lincoln cent struck in Philadelphia carried no mint mark. That's normal. Philadelphia pennies didn't use a P back then, so every 1981 cent without a mint mark looks ordinary. That's exactly what makes this story so unsettling, because collectors have learned, sometimes decades later, that ordinary years can hide extraordinary mistakes. The early 1980s were a turning point at the mint. Rising copper prices were squeezing production. New equipment was being tested. Die hubs were changed. Quality control was under pressure. And when systems change, errors slip through. That's where the 1981 no mint mark Lincoln cent enters the picture. At first glance, it's Abraham Lincoln facing right, the familiar wheat-free memorial reverse on the back. Nothing dramatic, nothing flashy. But collectors who know where to look don't see a penny. They see a potential anomaly. And anomalies are where fortunes begin. Here's where the tension tightens. Some 1981 cents were struck with dramatic doubled dies. Not the kind you need a microscope to imagine, but bold, unmistakable doubling in Lincoln's date, his profile, the lettering in Liberty, and in God We Trust. Coins like that aren't supposed to exist unnoticed. Yet they did, and some were spent, circulated, forgotten. Imagine finding a coin where the date seems to echo itself. Is it where? Or is it doubling? That question alone has sent collectors racing to their magnifying glasses late at night, heart pounding. But that's only the first twist. Others were reportedly struck off-center, broad-struck, or with misaligned dies so severe the design seems to slide off the coin. Errors like that turn a penny into a one-of-a-kind artifact. And in the error coin world, uniqueness is power. Then comes the revelation that stops people cold. 1981 was one of the last full years the Lincoln cent was made of solid copper alloy. 95% copper. Heavy. Resonant. Just 1 year later, the mint would switch to zinc cores with thin copper plating. That transition period is a minefield of mistakes. Collectors have documented off-metal strikes where coins were struck on the wrong planchets. Wrong metal. Wrong weight. Wrong expectations. And when a no-mint mark 1981 cent shows up with characteristics that don't match what it should be, alarms go off. Now let's talk about condition. Because condition changes everything. A worn error might be interesting. But a pristine, razor-sharp example in top mint state? That's where numbers stop making sense. High-grade coins are graded on a brutal scale. MS-65, MS-67, MS-68. Each step up multiplies value. And in rare cases, a single point on that scale can mean the difference between thousands and hundreds of thousands. This is where the story takes its most shocking turn. In the uppermost tiers of certified condition, select 1981 no mint mark Lincoln cents with extraordinary errors have reportedly commanded staggering prices. One reported market sale, often cited in collector circles, reached as high as $844,000 for a top condition example tied to an extreme error profile point. $844,000 for a penny. Let that settle in. That's not a typo. That's not a rumor pulled from thin air. It's a number that keeps resurfacing in discussions among advanced collectors and auction watchers. And while not every detail is public, one thing is clear. When rarity, error severity, and flawless condition collide, the ceiling disappears. And here's the part that makes people uneasy. Most of these coins were never saved on purpose. They weren't protected in velvet cases. They weren't handed down with stories attached. They were minted, spent, and scattered into the bloodstream of everyday commerce, which means some are still out there, still hiding, still waiting. Act 2 deepens the mystery. Because if these coins are so valuable, why haven't we all heard about them? The answer is simple and uncomfortable. Coin collecting isn't loud. It doesn't shout. It whispers. Discoveries are often made by individuals, not institutions. A retiree checking a roll of cents. A metal detectorist who decides to look closer. A collector who knows just enough to ask the right question. And many people miss them. They assume doubling is damage. They assume odd weight is wear. They assume off-center means worthless. They spend the coin, and the opportunity vanishes. Think about that the next time you hear change clink into your hand. How many once-in-a-lifetime finds have been handed back to a cashier? There's also another layer few talk about. Population reports. The number of known top-grade examples is painfully small, sometimes single digits, sometimes one. When demand rises and supply is frozen, values don't climb. They leaped. That's how pennies turn into headlines. And the Lincoln cent, perhaps more than any other U.S. coin, is the great equalizer. Everyone has access. You don't need a vault. You don't need connections. You need curiosity and courage, because looking closely means confronting the possibility that you already missed something. Now we approach the final act. The payoff. Here's the truth seasoned collectors understand. Most pennies are worth 1 cent, but a tiny fraction are worth more than anyone expects. And the only way to know which side of history your coin is on is to look. The 1981 no mint mark Lincoln cent is dangerous because it looks safe. It blends in. It pretends to be common. But beneath that familiar copper surface could be doubling, a misstrike, a planchet error, or a condition so pristine it defies odds. This is the moment where inspiration meets urgency, because every year that passes, more coins are lost to wear. More are damaged. More are melted. The window narrows. The survivors become more valuable, and somewhere, someone is going to check a coin and feel that electric jolt. That moment when the date looks wrong, when the lettering jumps, when the scale reads heavier than it should, when the penny doesn't behave like a penny. That moment changes people. It turns pocket change into possibility. So the question isn't whether these coins exist. The market has already answered that. The question is whether one of them is already in your world, waiting for you to notice, before you dump that jar, before you roll that change, before you say it's just a penny. Because history has a habit of hiding wealth in the most ordinary places, and sometimes, all it takes to unlock it is a closer look. What if I told you that a penny you've probably ignored your entire life could be worth more than your house, more than your retirement, maybe even more than everything in your bank account combined? Not a gold coin, not an ancient relic. A penny, brown, ordinary, dated 1982, with a tiny little D mint mark under Lincoln's shoulder. Most people would laugh and toss it back into a jar, and that mistake could cost them everything. Because buried inside the story of the 1982 D. Lincoln cent is one of the most unsettling truths in American coin collecting. Some of the rarest, most valuable coins in existence don't look rare at all. They hide in plain sight, and the people who find them usually weren't looking. This is the story of a penny struck during a year of chaos at the U.S. Mint, a year so strange, so experimental, that it produced coins with hidden errors, mismatched metals, and mysteries that collectors are still arguing about today. And yes, coins that have reportedly sold for jaw-dropping sums, with headlines claiming prices as high as $844,000 in top condition, and whispered valuations that climb even higher. So before you dismiss the change in your pocket, listen carefully. Because by the end of this story, You may never look at a penny the same way again. In 1982, something unprecedented happened at the United States Mint. Copper became too expensive. For decades, Lincoln cents were made primarily of copper, solid, dependable, heavy. But inflation and rising metal prices forced the mint into a corner. If they kept making pennies the old way, each one would cost more than a cent to produce. So they made a decision that would quietly change history. They switched metals. Almost overnight, the familiar copper cent was replaced with a lighter zinc core coated in a thin layer of copper. To the naked eye, the coins looked nearly identical. But in reality, they were completely different. And here's where things start to unravel. 1982 wasn't a clean break. It was a transition year, a year of overlap, a year of confusion. The mint struck pennies in multiple compositions, multiple date styles, multiple varieties, large dates, small dates, copper, zinc, Philadelphia, Denver. 7 major varieties officially recognized. But when you're rushing millions of coins through massive presses, mistakes don't just happen, they multiply. Some blanks were left over from the old copper stock. Others were misrouted. Some dies didn't match the planchets they struck. And in Denver, where every 1982 D-cent was supposed to be zinc, collectors began noticing something deeply unsettling. A few of these coins felt wrong, heavier, thicker, different. Could it be possible that copper planchets, never intended for Denver in 1982, were struck with a D-mint mark? The mint said no. Collectors weren't convinced. Because weight doesn't lie. A normal 1982 zinc cent weighs about 2.5 grams. A copper cent weighs around 3.1 grams. That difference may sound small, but in the world of rare coins, it's the difference between pocket change and a financial earthquake. Over the years, a handful of 1982 D-cents surfaced that appeared to weigh like copper. Not plated, not altered, but struck on the wrong metal. If even one of these coins is authenticated beyond doubt, it wouldn't just be rare, it would be historic. And that's where the stakes explode. Because transitional errors, coins struck on the wrong metal during a composition change, are among the most valuable errors ever discovered. Think about it. The famous 1943 copper penny, a mistake born from wartime metal changes. Only a few known. One sold for well over $1 million. Now ask yourself a dangerous question. What if the next great transitional error isn't from World War II, but from 1982? Suddenly, that boring penny doesn't seem so boring anymore. But the metal isn't the only secret hiding in plain sight. Look closely at the date. In 1982, the mint used 2 different styles for the numbers, what collectors call large date and small date. The differences are subtle. The curve of the 2, the thickness of the 8, the way the 1 sits in relation to the rest of the date. Most people would never notice. But some combinations shouldn't exist. When a small date die meets the wrong planchet. When a Denver mint mark appears where it statistically shouldn't. When the weight, the look, and the strike all contradict official records. That's when a penny stops being a penny. That's when it becomes a question mark worth potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars. And yes, reported sales have sent shockwaves through the hobby. High-grade 1982 D-error cents, especially those with dramatic mint mistakes, off-metal strikes, or extreme rarity, have been linked to private sales and auction results reaching astonishing levels. Some reports cite prices climbing into the hundreds of thousands. One headline that refuses to die claims a pristine, top-condition example changed hands for as much as $844,000. Is every claim verified? No. Is every story accepted by the mainstream? Absolutely not. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Every legendary coin started as a rumor. Before the 1955 double die was famous, it was just a weird penny someone noticed. Before the 1969 double die became a 6-figure coin, people spent them without a second thought. History doesn't announce itself. It whispers, and sometimes it whispers through a penny in your change jar. Imagine the moment that you're at your kitchen table. A scale costs less than dinner for 2. You drop a 1982 D-cent onto it 2.5 grams? Probably zinc. But what if it reads 3.1? Your heart skips. You check again. Same result. Now the questions come rushing. Is it plated? Is it altered? Or is it something else, something the mint never meant to release? That's the emotional core of this story. Hope mixed with fear. Excitement colliding with doubt. Because the difference between fantasy and fortune is verification, authentication, condition. A coin like this in poor shape might be interesting. In excellent condition, it becomes dangerous. In near-perfect condition, it becomes the kind of object that changes families, not just finances. And here's the twist most people never see coming. You don't need to be a professional collector to find one. Some of the most valuable error coins ever discovered were found by ordinary people. Cashiers, mechanics, retirees, people who simply slowed down long enough to look twice. People in their 40s, 50s, 60s. People who remember when pennies actually bought something. People exactly like you. That's why this story matters. Not because every 1982 D-cent is valuable. Most aren't, but because one might be. And because the cost of checking is almost nothing, while the cost of ignoring could be everything. So the next time you see that familiar Lincoln profile, the next time you spot that tiny D under his shoulder, don't rush past it. Feel its weight. Study the date. Ask the question most people never think to ask. What if this one is different? Because somewhere out there, maybe in a drawer, maybe in a jar, maybe in your pocket right now, is a coin that slipped through the cracks of history. A mistake, an accident, a silent survivor of a chaotic year at the U.S. Mint. And the person who finds it won't look like a treasure hunter. They'll look like someone who simply paid attention. Check your coins. History may already be waiting in your hands. Somewhere in America, right now, a penny sits unnoticed in a jar, a drawer, maybe even your pocket. It looks ordinary, brown, worn, worth 1 cent. At least, that's what everyone thinks. But what if that single coin carried a secret? What if it wasn't just a penny, but a six-figure, even life-changing discovery hiding in plain sight? Tonight, we're talking about the 1979 Lincoln cent with no mint mark. A coin most people have seen, many have spent, and almost no one has truly examined. Because buried within this unassuming copper coin is a story of hidden errors, whispered legends, and reported sales that have stunned even seasoned collectors. Numbers climbing into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and in extreme cases, claims that soar toward the $1 million mark. And here's the unsettling part. The people who found these coins weren't experts. They weren't wealthy investors. They were ordinary Americans who happened to look twice. Picture this. It's 1979. Gas is cheap by today's standards. Disco still echoes on the radio, and the U.S. Mint is churning out billions of pennies for everyday commerce. Philadelphia alone strikes enormous quantities of Lincoln cents. So many that they don't even bother stamping a mint mark. No letter, no identifier, just Lincoln's portrait, quiet and familiar. And that's where the danger lies. Because when something is everywhere, we stop seeing it. For decades, these 1979 no mint mark cents were ignored, tossed into change jars, spent without a thought. But beneath that familiarity, something strange began to surface. Collectors started noticing anomalies, subtle at first. Letters that looked doubled, numbers that seemed thicker than they should be, rims that appeared unusually wide, coins that didn't quite match what the mint said they produced. At first, it was dismissed. Machine doubling, people said. Damage, wishful thinking. But then the evidence grew harder to ignore. Under magnification, some 1979 no mint mark Lincoln cents showed unmistakable doubling, strong, rounded, intentional-looking duplication in the date, in the word liberty, even in God we trust. This wasn't damage after the fact. This was a die error, a mistake made before the coin ever touched human hands. And that changes everything, because when a die is misaligned during production, every coin it strikes carries that error. Suddenly, a mass-produced penny becomes a limited artifact, a survivor of a mechanical failure inside one of the most powerful mints in the world. But the story doesn't stop there. Other 1979 no-mint mark cents began turning up with dramatic off-center strikes, broad strikes that pushed the metal beyond its intended boundaries, and even rare planchet errors. Coins struck on the wrong metal entirely. Each error added another layer of mystery. Another reason to look closer. Then came the condition factor. This is where the narrative takes a sharp turn. Most pennies live hard lives. They're dropped, scraped, oxidized, worn smooth by decades of handling. But a tiny fraction escape that fate. They're pulled from circulation early, stored away, forgotten in rolls, albums, or safety deposit boxes. And when one of these error coins survives in near-perfect condition, the market reacts. Violently, third-party grading companies began certifying top-condition examples. Mint state 67, 68, even higher. And when those labels appeared, something extraordinary happened. Prices didn't rise gradually. They exploded. Auction houses reported fierce bidding wars. Collectors competed not just for a coin, but for bragging rights, for history, for rarity that could never be replicated. One reported sale sent shockwaves through the numismatic world. An elite, error-struck 1979 no-mint mark Lincoln cent, in top condition commanding as much as $844,000. Let that sink in. A penny, nearly $1 million. Skeptics scoffed. Headlines spread. Forums lit up. Was it real? Was it hype? Was this the exception that proved the rule, or the beginning of something bigger? And then came the whispers. Private sales, quiet negotiations, coins that never made the public auction block. Stories of values pushed even higher when multiple rare traits collided in a single specimen. Dramatic doubling, pristine surfaces, flawless luster, and undeniable authenticity. Some collectors began using a word rarely associated with modern pennies: million-dollar potential. Now pause for a moment and ask yourself a dangerous question. What if one of these coins slipped through unnoticed? What if it was spent at a grocery store, or dropped into a donation jar, or handed to you as change last week? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. The 1979 no-mint mark Lincoln cent isn't rare in existence. It's rare in discovery, rare in condition, rare in combination. And those are exactly the kinds of coins that rewrite lives. Think about the psychology of it. Most people assume treasure is buried deep underground or locked behind museum glass. They don't expect it to weigh 3 grams and fit under a fingernail. They don't expect wealth to look this ordinary. That assumption is why these coins keep slipping through the cracks. Collectors who know what to look for start with the basics. No mint mark beneath the date, meaning Philadelphia. Then the magnification comes out. Are the numbers in 1979 crisp or doubled? Does Liberty show separation instead of flat smearing? Are the rims unusually wide, pulling the design inward? Does the coin feel heavier or lighter than it should? Each question tightens the suspense. Each answer pushes the value needle higher, or shatters the illusion. But when everything lines up, when the coin passes scrutiny and earns a top-tier grade, the transformation is complete. 1 cent becomes a financial event. And here's where urgency creeps in. Every year, fewer of these coins survive in pristine condition. Copper corrodes. Mishandling destroys value instantly. Cleaning, a mistake countless people make, can wipe out tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars in a single swipe. Time is not neutral here. Time is the enemy. Meanwhile, demand is growing. A new generation of collectors is entering the market. Wealthy buyers want tangible assets, something historic, something finite. And nothing is more finite than a mint error that can never be recreated. So what happens when demand rises and supply quietly disappears? Prices don't just climb. They lurch. This is why stories like the 1979 no-mint mark Lincoln cent refuse to die. They tap into something primal. The idea that fortune doesn't always announce itself. That sometimes it whispers, and maybe, just maybe, It's whispering from your own change jar. Imagine the moment. You're sorting coins absent-mindedly. Then you notice it. The date. The missing mint mark. Something looks off. You tilt the coin under a light. The doubling jumps out. Your pulse changes. Suddenly, this isn't spare change anymore. It's possibility. That moment has happened before. It will happen again. The only question is to whom, because history has already shown us what's possible. A penny struck in 1979, ignored for decades, then elevated to headlines, auctions, and staggering valuations that defy common sense. Not because it was supposed to be special, but because it wasn't supposed to exist this way at all. That's the power of errors. They are accidents frozen in time. Proof that even the most controlled systems fail. And when they do, the fallout can be priceless. The next time you hear coins clink together, don't tune it out. Listen, look, question what you're holding. Because wealth doesn't always come wrapped in gold. Sometimes it wears copper and hides behind familiarity. And somewhere out there, right now, another 1979 no mint mark Lincoln cent is waiting. Waiting to be noticed. Waiting to change someone's life. Make sure it isn't spent before you get the chance to look.
In 1964, something slipped quietly into America's pockets. It didn't sparkle. It didn't announce itself. It looked like every other penny you've ever ignored. And yet today, that same coin has been whispered about in auction rooms, debated by experts, and hunted by ordinary Americans who dream of one impossible moment, turning spare change into life-changing wealth. What if I told you that a single Lincoln cent, with no mint mark at all, has been linked to reported sales as high as $844,000, and valuations that, under the right circumstances, have reached into the millions? And what if I told you it might already be in your home? This is the story of the 1964 no mint mark Lincoln cent. A coin so ordinary it became extraordinary. A coin hiding secrets in plain sight. And a coin that has turned kitchen table dreamers into serious contenders for fortune. Act 1 begins with a paradox. 1964 was one of the most chaotic years in U.S. coinage history. Silver was disappearing from circulation. The public was hoarding coins. The U.S. Mint was under intense pressure to produce money faster than ever before. Billions of coins flooded out of Philadelphia and Denver, rushed, overworked, and often imperfect. And here's the detail most people missed. In 1964, penny struck in Philadelphia carried no mint mark at all. No letter. No identifier. Just Lincoln's profile and the date. That means the most valuable version of this coin looks exactly like the least valuable one. Let that sink in. The coin that could be worth a fraction of a cent, and the coin that could fund your retirement, may appear identical at first glance. That's where the danger begins. And where the opportunity explodes, because during that frantic year, mistakes happened. Not tiny mistakes. Monumental ones. Dies were overused. Master hubs were changed mid-year. Experimental strikes were rumored. And somewhere in that chaos, a handful of 1964 Lincoln cents were born different, very different. Collectors later began noticing strange anomalies. Letters that appeared doubled, almost vibrating off the surface. Numbers in the date that looked thicker, bolder, misaligned. Lincoln's profile with unusual contours. Fields with mirror-like finishes that had no business existing on a standard circulation penny. And then came the whispers. What if some 1964 cents weren't supposed to exist at all? What if a few were struck using special dies, possibly intended for experimental or presentation pieces, never meant to leave the mint? What if, accidentally or otherwise, they did? That's when the story takes a turn. Because among advanced collectors, the phrase 1964 no mint mark stopped meaning common. It started meaning potential. Certain examples, authenticated with dramatic double die characteristics or rare surface qualities, began selling for 5 figures. Then 6. And then came the headline that electrified the coin world. A top condition Lincoln cent, linked by collectors to the elusive 1964 era errors, reportedly reached a market price as high as $844,000. One coin. 1 cent. Almost $1 million. Suddenly, this wasn't a hobby anymore. It was a hunt. Act 2 is where suspense tightens, because here's the cruel twist: most people who handle these coins never notice what makes them special. They're spent at gas stations, tossed into tip jars, buried in coffee cans, rolled up and sent back to the bank every day. Potentially historic coins vanish forever, and the clock is ticking. Copper cents are being pulled from circulation at an accelerating pace. Collections are being liquidated. Estates are being cleared out. Each year, fewer untouched 1964 cents remain. So what separates the worthless from the wildly valuable? Not luck. Attention, the most sought-after 1964 no-mint mark cents show dramatic doubled die features, especially in the date and lettering. Not the cheap machine doubling that fools beginners, but strong, rounded, unmistakable doubling that looks like a shadow frozen in metal. Some show die cracks, cuts, or misalignments that shouldn't exist together. Others display unusually sharp strikes paired with reflective surfaces, suggesting something far from routine production, and condition changes everything. A circulated example with wear? Interesting, but limited. A pristine, blazing red cent with full mint luster, untouched by time? That's where the numbers stop making sense. That's where six figures turn into speculation. And speculation turns into obsession, because in numismatics, condition isn't a detail. It's destiny. A single grade jump can multiply value tenfold. A tiny scratch can erase a fortune. And a perfect coin, frozen in time, can become the crown jewel of a collection or the centerpiece of a record-breaking sale. Now here's the part that keeps people awake at night. Some experts believe there are still undiscovered 1964 no-mint mark cents out there that rival the finest known examples, unsubmitted, ungraded, unrecognized, sitting in jars, in old rolls, in drawers that haven't been opened since the Nixon administration. Think about that. The most dangerous hiding place for a treasure is familiarity. Act 3 begins with the realization that changes everything. You don't need to be a professional dealer. You don't need inside connections. You don't need to spend years studying arcane catalogs. You just need curiosity and the courage to look twice, because every legendary coin story starts the same way. Someone almost didn't check, someone almost spent it, someone almost missed it, and then, pause, something looked off, or the date seemed strange. The letters felt heavier. The shine didn't match. That moment of doubt is where fortunes are born. The 1964 no-mint mark Lincoln cent is not valuable because it's old. It's valuable because it sits at the intersection of chaos, scarcity, and human error. It's a reminder that even in a system designed for perfection, mistakes escape, and when they do, they don't announce themselves, they wait. If you've ever dreamed of finding something small that changes everything, this is your sign. Check your pennies. Check your rolls. Check that old jar you've ignored for decades, because history has already proven one thing: the next extraordinary 1964 Lincoln cent will not be found by an expert searching a vault. It will be found by someone who decided to look, and when they do, a lifetime of ordinary moments will be replaced by one unforgettable discovery. A single cent, a silent error. And a story that begins the moment you stop assuming and start searching. Imagine pulling a single penny from your pocket, a brown, ordinary-looking Lincoln cent you've ignored your entire life. No silver shine. No gold glow. Just copper. And yet, that exact coin, if it carries one tiny letter beneath Lincoln's date, has been whispered about in auction rooms, fought over by elite collectors, and linked to reported sales climbing as high as $844,000. 1 cent, nearly $1 million. And the most unsettling part? Millions of Americans may have already spent it without ever knowing what they had. This is the story of the 1961 Lincoln cent, a coin so underestimated, so deceptively common, that it has quietly become one of the most hunted modern-era pennies in American numismatics. Not because it was supposed to be rare, but because of what went wrong, and sometimes, mistakes are worth fortunes. Act 1 begins with a year most people forget. 1961, no moon landing. No major wars ending. No grand redesign of American money. The Denver Mint struck over 1.7 billion Lincoln cents that year. Billion with a B. That alone should make this penny worthless, right? That assumption is exactly why this story works, because rarity isn't always about how many were made. It's about how many survived, in the right condition, with the right flaw, unnoticed. The 1961 cent entered circulation quietly. No headlines. No celebration. Just another penny moving through vending machines, gas station tills, and children's pockets. But behind the scenes, something unusual was happening at the Denver Mint. Dies were being overused. Mint marks were being punched by hand. Quality control wasn't what it is today, and that's when the first whispers began. Collectors started spotting something strange beneath the date. The D-Mint mark didn't always look right. Some appeared doubled. Some tilted. Some repunched so clearly you could see two impressions fighting for space. These weren't random scratches. They were mint-made errors, permanent, undeniable, and impossible to replicate. Here's the first cliffhanger. Most people never look at the mint mark, they glance at the date. They glance at Lincoln's face. And they move on, but that tiny D smaller than a grain of rice is where fortunes have been hiding. As more examples surfaced, specialists realized this wasn't just one error. It was a family of errors. Repunched mint marks. D over D varieties. Tilted Ds. Even rare transitional die states where the mint mark appears to shift position. Each one traceable. Each one catalogued. Each one more valuable than the last, but errors alone don't create six-figure coins, condition does, and this is where the story takes a sharp turn. Most 1961 D cents were used hard. Copper darkened. Surfaces nicked. Luster lost forever. But a microscopic fraction, perhaps pulled aside by collectors, perhaps forgotten in rolls, survived in near-perfect condition. We're talking blazing red copper. Original mint luster. Razor-sharp strike. No carbon spots. No contact marks, coins graded MS67 red and higher. At that level, the population drops to near zero. And when rarity meets obsession, price becomes irrelevant. One auction changed everything. A top condition 1961 D Lincoln cent, virtually flawless, screaming with red brilliance, crossed the auction block and stunned the numismatic world. The hammer fell at a reported $844,000. Not for gold. Not for silver. But for a penny. Suddenly, collectors went back to their boxes. Dealers rechecked inventory. Roll hunters started paying attention again, because if one could sell for that much, what else was out there? Stack 2 is where suspense tightens, because the most valuable 1961 D cents aren't just high grade. They combine perfection with error. A pristine coin with a dramatic repunched mint mark. A flawless surface with a doubled design element. A coin that should not exist, yet does, and here's the twist few people talk about. Some experts believe there are undiscovered elite examples still sitting in old collections. Not because they're hidden, but because they were never submitted for grading. Never authenticated. Never celebrated. Think about that. How many people inherit jars of pennies? How many estate collections get dumped back into circulation? How many bankrolls from the 1960s were never searched with today's knowledge? What if the next record-breaking coin isn't in a museum, but in a dresser drawer? The market has already shown what happens when one surfaces. Bidding wars. National attention. Private collectors stepping in with blank checks, and while not every 1961 D cent is worth a fortune, the gap between ordinary and extraordinary is razor thin. One microscopic detail. One grade point. One overlooked error. That's the tension, because this coin doesn't announce itself. It waits. Then there's the million-dollar conversation. Could a 1961 D cent ever reach seven figures? Some numismatists say yes, under the right circumstances. A top population coin. A newly discovered dramatic error. A registry-set battle between ultra-wealthy collectors. History has shown it before. Coins don't need to be old to be priceless. They need to be irreplaceable, and as surviving populations shrink and demand grows, pressure builds. Every year, more coins are damaged. More are lost. More are locked away forever, which means the few that remain, the truly elite, become more powerful. Act 3 begins with you, because this isn't just history. It's opportunity right now. Somewhere in America, someone is holding a 1961 D Lincoln cent without realizing what they're holding. Maybe it's brown. Maybe it's red. Maybe it's sitting in a coffee can with hundreds of others, but the difference between a penny and a house is knowledge. Look at the mint mark. Is it clean? Is it doubled? Does it look punched twice? Tilted? Strange, look at the surface. Is the color original? Is the luster still alive? Are the details sharp? Ask yourself a dangerous question. What if this is the one? Because every legendary coin story starts the same way. Ordinary moment. Ordinary object. Extraordinary discovery. The 1961 D. Lincoln cent doesn't promise riches. But it offers something more powerful, possibility, the possibility that history passed through your hands. That value hid in plain sight. That the next headline hasn't been written yet, and the only way to know is to look. So the next time you see a penny dated 1961 with a small d beneath the year, don't spend it, pause, because sometimes the smallest coins carry the heaviest weight, and sometimes wealth whispers before it roars. Most people would walk right past it. A dull brown penny. 1958, Lincoln's familiar profile. Nothing special. Or so it seems. But what if I told you that one ordinary-looking cent, the 1958 D. Lincoln penny, has stunned the coin world, ignited bidding wars, and reportedly sold for as much as $844,000, with whispers of values that climb even higher? What if the smallest coin in your pocket carried the power to change your life? Because for a select few, that's already happened. This is not a fairy tale. This is a true American coin mystery, one forged in Denver, overlooked for decades, and now hunted with near-obsessive intensity. And by the end of this story, you may never look at your spare change the same way again. It starts in 1958, the final year of the wheat cent era. Eisenhower is president. America is booming. Millions of pennies roll out of the Denver Mint, stamped with a small d beneath the date. They flood circulation. They buy newspapers, coffee, candy bars. And then, they disappear into pockets, jars, and drawers across the nation. Nothing about that sounds extraordinary until someone looked closer. Years later, under magnification, collectors noticed something unsettling. Something that shouldn't be there. Or rather, something that was there twice. The mint mark, the tiny d, wasn't clean. It wasn't crisp. It looked doubled. Shifted. Almost as if the coin had been struck with two different identities fighting for the same space. Was it damage? Wishful thinking? Or something far more valuable? Here's where the story takes its first sharp turn. The 1958 D. Lincoln cent is infamous for a rare and controversial mint error known as the D/S repunched mint mark. That means the Denver Mint accidentally punched a Denver D over a San Francisco S, a mistake that was never meant to leave the building. Yet somehow, a handful escaped into circulation, and when that truth surfaced, the race was on. How many exist? No one knows for sure. Estimates range from a few dozen to perhaps fewer than 10 in top condition. Some experts believe the real number of high-grade examples can be counted on one hand, and scarcity is where value is born. But this isn't just about rarity. It's about condition. Because here's the brutal reality of coin collecting. Most 1958 D pennies are worth 1 cent. Maybe 2. But the moment you pair a genuine D/S error with pristine condition, blazing red copper, razor-sharp details, untouched surfaces, the rules change suddenly. We're not talking about pocket change. We're talking about 6 figures. 7 figures. Life-altering money. At auction, a top-grade 1958 D/S Lincoln cent reportedly reached an eye-watering $844,000. Let that sink in. A penny. Less metal than a paperclip. Nearly $1 million. And that's not even where the speculation ends. In private conversations and hushed collector forums, whispers circulate of valuations that push toward the $1 million mark and beyond for the absolute finest known examples. Why such insanity over a single cent? Because it hits the perfect storm. Final year of the wheat cent. Dramatic mint error. Extreme rarity. And relentless demand from collectors who know they may never get another chance. Here's the part that makes people uneasy. For decades, these coins weren't locked away in vaults. They were spent. Dropped. Forgotten. Passed down in coffee cans and dresser drawers. Some were even tossed into Coinstar machines without a second glance. That means the story isn't over. Somewhere, maybe in an old jar, a childhood collection, or a box of worthless pennies, another one could still be hiding, and that possibility is what keeps collectors awake at night. So what exactly are they looking for? The key is the mint mark. Under magnification, the D shows clear signs of an underlying S. Not a shadow. Not damage. But a distinct remnant, curves, serifs, or edges that don't belong to Denver alone. It's subtle, and that's what makes it dangerous. Thousands of people have dismissed real errors because they didn't know what they were seeing, and then there's the color. Original red copper dramatically multiplies value. A brown, worn example might still be worth thousands. But a blazing red gem? That's where auction houses start clearing their calendars, but here's the twist most people don't expect: the controversy. Not everyone agrees. For years, the 1958 DD over S was debated, challenged, questioned. Some experts argued it wasn't real. Others dismissed it as damage or coincidence. That uncertainty only added fuel to the fire. Because when a coin survives scrutiny, skepticism, and time and still commands staggering prices, it earns legend status, and legend creates demand. Imagine holding one in your hand. A single cent that has outlived presidents, survived controversy, and now commands more attention than luxury cars and beachfront property. Imagine realizing that what you once ignored could pay off your house. Fund your retirement. Change your family's future. That's not greed. That's opportunity. And here's the most unsettling question of all: what if you've already seen one? What if it slipped through your fingers because no one ever told you what to look for? The American dream isn't always loud. Sometimes it's copper-colored. Sometimes it weighs 3.11 grams. Sometimes it hides in plain sight. This is why people search rolls of pennies night after night. Why estate sales draw crowds. Why collectors still believe the next great discovery hasn't been made yet, because history keeps proving them right. The 1958 D Lincoln cent wasn't supposed to be special. That's what makes it dangerous. That's what makes it powerful. And that's why its story still isn't finished. So the next time you see a penny from 1958, don't rush. Don't assume. Look closer. Because buried in that tiny D might be a secret meant for someone bold enough to notice. And if fortune ever does smile on you, if you ever feel that jolt of disbelief when copper turns into destiny, remember this moment, the moment you realize that life-changing wealth doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers from the bottom of a jar.